Call the meeting to order, and we're going to begin with the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second. Okay.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo. That might be him. Okay. Well, motion still carries.
Okay, perfect. Next, we'll go to the closed session agenda. We'll take public comment. Is there any comment from the floor? Seeing none, any comment on the phones? Okay, with that, we will adjourn to closed session. Now reconvene in open session, and we'll start with a report out on closed session.
Sure. Board met in closed session to discuss the litigation items identified on the agenda. Board received a report from special counsel regarding those matters. No reportable action took place. The board did not meet on the real property negotiation item that was identified. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And lastly, we'll do the roll call.
Chairman Peters,
Here.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Present.
Director Griffin,
Present.
Director Itmeyer,
Present.
Director Vallejo.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is number 6, which is public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board on matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anybody that would like to speak under public comments?
Judy Decker. Yes, Mr. Lemieux, I have a question for you. In the groundwater, in the groundwater adjudication, who do you represent?
I represent the city of Ridgecrest.
I see. Thank you.
Any other public comment from the floor? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the phones. It looks like we have a caller. Go ahead. Go ahead, caller. Okay, looks like no longer have anyone on the phones. Okay, so that will take us to item 7, which is board member comments. This time is reserved for comments by members of the board and or staff to identify matters for future business. Are there any comments from members of the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes approval of minutes of the board meeting for December 13th, which is item A. Includes item B, resolution 124, appointing Emma Lynch as the new PAC representative for BLM, as well as items C 1 through 5, which is an approval of expenditures. Do we have any comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Any on the phones? Oh, we do have one. Caller, go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee Weston-Lusk. I somehow got cut off when you had the open public comment for items not on the agenda. I just want to know when there's new methods of measurement for doing groundwater assessment of any kind, is there a government agency that reviews that and then determines whether it should be used as a vetted method of doing groundwater measurements, etc. Because I'm basically referring to the water districts. I guess they call it the SkyTem project that supposedly was able to do some kind of measurements of the quantity of water in the basin that is now left, etc., and depths, etc. So I just want to know, is there any kind of government agency that accepts new methods and makes it the new gold standard of measurement in certain cases?
Got it. Thank you, Ms. Westalesk. We'll try and get you an answer on that.
Do you want me to, can I?
Yes, sir.
May I?
Mr. Lemieux, go ahead.
There is, in a sense, and that is the entity that you're addressing now, the GA. The GA's role is to consider data and science about the groundwater basin and to determine the best science and then apply that for purposes of managing the basin. And of course, that's reviewed by the Department of Water Resources and confirmed by them. So those are the entities that are responsible for that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lemieux.
Could I make
Okay.
a comment on that also for Renee? That also Department of Water and Resources would look at that also, because they are funding, and State Water Control Board is funding some of the Rambo studies. So they're also using Rambo for studies all over the state of California.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other callers on this? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Vallejo. Motion carries.
Thank you. Our next item is number 9, which is to authorize the release of requests for bids for utility potholing services for the imported water pipeline. Is it going to be with Carol?
That should be with us. This is Steve. That should be with us. Jeff,
Go
you
ahead,
guys
Steve,
on.
thanks.
Sorry, Jeff. This is
Hello.
Bianca.
Yes. Hello, members of the board and public. This is Bianca. Can everyone hear me? Double checking.
Yes, we can, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So as you are aware, DWR's Sigma implementation grant is providing $7.6 million for planning and design level activities for the imported water project. The project includes approximately 50 miles of pipeline, 3 pump stations, 2 4-bay tanks, and a regulating tank. The project's design consultant, Provost and Pritchard, have recommended that the authority hire a qualified contractor to conduct field work consisting of minor excavations known as potholing. This will be to verify the location and size of existing underground utilities and structures to reduce potential conflicts between the design alignment and the actual location of existing utilities, which may differ from the locations shown on maps obtained from the utility owners. Therefore, this could avoid costly contract change orders during construction of the project. Provost and Pritchard have prioritized 20 locations throughout California City and Kern County, and the contractor will be required to obtain the required encroachment permits, developing and implementing traffic and pedestrian control plans, and restoring the sites. The notice inviting bids is included in your board packet for review, and staff anticipates advertising the notice inviting bids online and accepting the proposals over approximately a 3-week period. The lowest responsible bidder complying with the notice inviting bids will be recommended to the board for award at a future board meeting. Provost and Pritchard has estimated that the cost will be approximately $15,000 for the services. And to conclude, staff recommends the board authorize the release of these requests for bids. I'm open to any questions, and I also believe Provost and Pritchard is on the line as well in case there are any questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Before we go to public comment, are there any questions from the board?
I have a few questions I'd like to ask.
Director Griffin.
Bianca, this is Chuck Griffin. Could you clarify for us, please? Is it 15,000 per location? Is that their estimate?
No, it is $15,000 in total for all 20 of the locations.
Okay, that seems very far-fetched for me. I'm a licensed contractor, and that's what I do is potholing. And I really do not understand how you could even set up traffic control on 20 locations, especially on a state highway on New Relia, through Cal City. So I'm very concerned about the pricing on it.
Real quick, Chuck, I'm looking at the document. It actually says 20 locations for 50,000, 50.
50, yeah,
Okay.
it's 50,000,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, 50,050.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I still feel that is not adequate, but my concern is that we have not even approved this project, and so I think it's premature to award a potholing contract when it gets approved, if it gets approved. When we move forward through design, those changes could be made very easily, and the potholing could be done at any time before construction started. But to spend the money right now, I think it's just a waste of taxpayer and our money.
So with that,
Chairman,
in
Chairman,
the report,
if I may,
go ahead.
Chairman, if I may, I think what Director Griffin is missing here is what this potholing work is for. This potholing work is to identify whether our alignment is going to run into problems in that area related to archaeological and others. It's part of the CEQA work. So we need to do this potholing for that work to find out what we're doing and find out if our alignment will work. It's not to approve a project. This isn't potholing to determine the actual, shall we say, construction. It's more of, is our alignment area right? Bianca, Steve, is my properly
Yes.
identifying what we're doing?
Yeah, this is Steve, and Phil's correct. This is for design purposes. Good design people, and P&P are very good design people, always want to get as much information as they can in that design, because an appropriate design that takes into consideration potential obstacles or issues in the field will save a lot of money, could save a lot of money during construction, actual construction. So this is for design work, not for actual construction. This is making design plans as accurate as possible.
And is it, Steve, aren't I correct that this is this area where potholing is way away from any roadway area?
That most, if I can jump in, Steve, if you're okay. This is Michael McGovern with Owen Pritchard. Most of it is within Cal City on Redwood Boulevard and Neuralia Boulevard. So there's not the best as-built, and so there's some locations that we want to make sure, we're showing the alignment, the design alignment in the correct spot. And there's also some recent solar builds up in Neuralia, and there's a lot of conductor crossings and conductors on either side of the road that we'd like to pin down so we can have a better understanding of our alignment. So that's really what the crux of our work, to pin down that design and that reach.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Okay, Michael, could that not be accomplished through just simply calling in a USA Underground ticket to get you the alignment if it's only for that purpose?
Some of these solar companies do not have good records.
Yeah, and they did do USA. USA's already been done.
Yes, it's been done. And we did that for our survey.
Okay. So then you're also stating that it's in the roadway on Neuralia. Is that what I understood, or did I misunderstand that?
Well, there are crossing, the solar, existing solar electrical conductors cross over Neuralia. They're on either side of Neuralia in different locations. So they're on either the edge of, the unpaved shoulder on either side, or they're crossing Neuralia, the paved Neuralia. So we just want to make sure we're underneath those conductor banks. And there's also some sewer lines and water lines where we're not getting good records from Cal City, where we'd like to obtain some better understanding of the existing utilities that Cal City maintains there.
Okay, so my concern is the pricing issue. Also, because is there stipulations in Cal City? Have you checked on those before we even send this out to a bid or give a guesstimate on a price? As far as there's going to be asphalt patching, there's going to be slurry that's required if you expose anything in the street in a crossing. As far as I know, in Ridgecrest, we require the street to be slurried back when you dig it up. So are any of those costs included, or is that going to come as an additional change order for paving and patchback, hot asphalt, slurry?
That's probably contained in the prices from my experience for pothole. The city, Cal City, obviously may have different standards, and they may maybe a little less stringent. But we have gone through already with some of the. We've done soil borings in the road in Neuralia, and both with the county and Cal City, and have been able to patch those up pretty readily. I understand those, the different. We're talking about different sizes of diameter holes, but I think it can be done with that budget.
Is that,
Yeah, I would just like to see a real number before we just approve it, because I know it's impossible to pothole 20 locations for $50,000 and patch back and put slurry and do everything that's required. I mean, that's what I do for a living.
understood?
Yeah.
So I want to see a real number.
For the
If I
board,
could just add, there's only a portion of those are actually in the paved road. So there's a lot of them, especially in Cal City. They're actually in the unpaved shoulder, or in Cal City, there's kind of some divided roads there and frontage roads, and it's in the unpaved area. It's just when we get into Neuralia and the intersection of Cal City Boulevard and Neuralia that we're actually going to be paved. So it'd be a fraction of that.
for the board's consideration, this is to release for bids. This is not an authorization to do work. So this is release for bids. We come back with the results.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Tom, did you have a question?
Well, I noticed Phil Hall had mentioned that he originally thought that this contract request was for the archaeology side of things. My understanding is that is called, which is also 20 locations, happens to be coincidental, that's called test pits. And it's already included in the contract for the archaeologist, which is what BLM requires before we'll issue the geotech permit. Then that work is about to take place. So these are separate.
Correct. Thank you.
Independent issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'll just add that my questions were answered basically, but it states that field verification of the locations of the existing utilities during design could avoid costly contractor change orders during the construction of the project if conflicts were to occur. And I think that's pretty important because this project is, based on some pretty tight time constraints. And I think anything that we can do to make things run smooth and keep things on tracks very important. So.
Sure, thank you. Okay, seeing no more comments, we will go to public comment. Any members of the public that would like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none on the floor. Are there any on the phones? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Oh, okay, we got a motion, but looks like we're getting a call in right now, so do we have a caller on the line for this? Okay, go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee West. It only seems common sense to me that you approve this. I see more cost savings than I do wasting of funds. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there a second? We have a motion from Director Hayman. Is there a second? Okay, I'll go ahead and make the second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
No.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Vallejo. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 10, which is the overview of new DWR guidelines for GSP periodic evaluations and GSP amendments. And I believe this is with Steve or Jeff Helsley.
Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman Peters. Thank you very much. Jeff's going to do it. I just want to mention, we also have Heather on the line. You guys, a lot of you remember Heather. She's been busy. She's still working and as much as she can, but she's been building a family. But we do have Heather online too. She's working on the GSP work and on the annual report, but she's online. But I think Jeff's going to present.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board and the public. If we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, DWR released a guide to preparation of annual reports, periodic evaluations, and plan amendments, and also an associated fact sheet and resource document in late October of last year. We've been reviewing that and want to present what was contained in it and how we're going to be addressing these items. DWR typically has a workshop to have discussions on things like this. This particular time they didn't, so this is be presenting our understanding of the guidance document. We can go to the next slide. So we've had annual reports in front of the board before, and we'll have again shortly. It serves as a yearly status update on the groundwater sustainability plan implementation. They're due April 1st of every year. The guidance document had a suggested format and contents for the annual report. We've reviewed that. Our maybe arrangement of the material is a little bit different, but we think it's substantially, functionally and substantially compliant with that guidance document, except that the guidance document mentions 2 new sections that we hadn't had in previous annual reports. That's a section on progress made on addressing the recommended corrective actions and a section on outreach and engagement activities. We've added that to the draft annual report that's been distributed here recently. Go to the next slide. So periodic evaluation, this is actually something new. The periodic evaluation serves an assessment of how the GSP is performing and whether modifications are necessary. It determines whether or not a change to the groundwater sustainability plan is needed, and it does the analysis to determine that and presents that and presents what changes might be needed. The evaluation needs to address the recommended corrective actions that DWR provided when they approved the GSP back in 2020. These periodic evaluations are required every 5 years after submittal of the GSP. So our evaluation is due January 31st of 2025, so next year, the beginning of next year. So on the screens, the outline of the periodic evaluation that's in the guidelines. We need to present the new information that we've collected, talk about the groundwater conditions relative to the sustainable management criteria that we had in the GSP. Talk about the status of our projects and management actions. See if we have any new information on the basin setting see if we evaluate our monitoring network and make sure that it's been accomplishing what we needed to do to tell us about the groundwater conditions, and talk about any GSP authorities that have been created by the board or enforcement actions, and talk about outreach, engagement, and coordination. We're going to evaluate each one of those as we've been doing them, and go back and evaluate the GSP and making sure that we think we're still on track for making sustainability as we outlined it in the GSP. In that evaluation, we anticipate we will have some changes that would need to be made, so that the periodic evaluation will present a summary of those proposed revisions to the GSP. We go to the next slide. So the guidance document doesn't talk about an update of the groundwater sustainability plan. It talks about the groundwater sustainability plan amendment if we need to make any changes. And really the GSA determines whether or not there's any need to change the GSP based on the performance, the periodic evaluation we're going to do. There's no requirement to automatically update the GSP every 5 years. DWR had used that terminology, groundwater plan update, early on, and we've been using that, but it really flows out of the periodic evaluation. The evaluation is required. If it leads to the need for amendments, then amendments are made. The submittal requirements, if we amend the plan, are similar to when the plan was passed approved originally. We have to do, public notification requirements. It needs to be adopted by the board and then submitted to TWR for review. And it must be accomplished by the periodic evaluation. They go at least they go hand in hand in that matter. If you're going to do an amendment, you have to do a periodic evaluation. Let's go to the next slide. So for the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan, we've been doing planning on preparing this periodic evaluation, and here's some of the things we see now that will be addressed in the periodic evaluation, and additional things could be added to this as we're going through the evaluation. Some of the new data that we'll talk about in the periodic evaluation are some water quality data. We did some baseline water quality for some of our selected monitoring wells that we use for the sustainability criteria. The SkyTem data wasn't available when we finished updating the model for the last GSP, so we'll be looking at that and discussing that in the evaluation. We have some data on groundwater dependent ecosystems that we didn't have at that time, and we have some new hydrogeologic data. So that'll all be discussed in the evaluation. And in fact, that's also all been used here in the last 3 or 4 months to update the model again for this work that's going forward in the periodic evaluation of the plan amendment to restructure the model slightly, put in a better interpretation of the clay layers in the model. That work's all done. We'll be calibrating the model, hopefully completing the calibration this month, if not, then early next month. Then we'll be ready to run management scenarios. We will address how we're addressing the recommended corrective actions in the periodic evaluation, and we'll be mentioning on our projects and management actions, that the Title 16 report was approved for the recycled water project, although we also mentioned that we're not pursuing the funding for at this point, given our other needs for funding. And then one of the recommended corrective actions was to have a contingency plan, so we'll discuss that in the periodic evaluation. That'll lead to amendments to the GSP, or at least our recommended amendments on the basin setting portion. We'll talk about our update of the model and what the review of all that data has told us new about the basin itself. We've been doing some evaluations of the El Paso basin, and we'll be coming back to talk to we've talked with the TAC about that evaluation. We'll be talking with the TAC further about whether it should be a separate management area, and then back to this board about whether the El Paso area should be a separate management area. We'll update the water budgets in the plan. if under sustainability management criteria, if we all agree that we want to set up a separate management area for the El Paso Basin, we'll have to develop sustainable management criteria. And then we'll update talk about the communication and outreach efforts that have been done and update the projects and management actions in the GSP. So it's not a complete update of the GSP. It's just amending the things that we think need to be amended with the new information to better describe how we're going to get to sustainability. So our schedule, if we could go to the next slide, or really these are sort of our deadlines. The annual report is due on April 1st, as I mentioned. The draft was distributed last week. Comments are due on February 2nd, and we'll be bringing it back to the board once we review the comments and incorporate them, and then get it submitted by April 1. As I mentioned, the periodic evaluation and plan amendments need to be submitted by January 31st of 2025. But we'll be releasing the draft periodic evaluation sections as we develop them. It will release them individually for review. The first section that will be out will be at least a summary of the new information that's been collected. And then as we see a need to amend the GSP itself, once we've released the sections of the periodic evaluation, have people review it, given us comments back, and we've evaluated those comments, we'll make draft amendment changes to the GSP and release those revised sections for review after we've looked at the comments. So they may lag behind the sections of the periodic evaluation by a month to 2 months, maybe, to get the sections of the GSP out. So if we could go to the next slide. Here's when we anticipate getting the sections of the periodic evaluation out. The first one is, as I mentioned, is the new information collected. I should have that out next month. Then the groundwater conditions relative to our sustainable management criteria out in March. And then we'll get both a review of the monitoring networks and the status of the projects and management actions out in April. By then, we'll probably have a good idea of what amendments we do want to make, put those out for review and discussion in May. And then the remaining sections in June for the basin setting changes we might need to make, the discussion of the outreach engagement activities, and just a discussion of the authorities of the GSA and enforcement actions, and all in June. So sort of our overall schedule is on the next slide. Yeah, here we go. So we think a complete draft of the periodic evaluation that incorporates the comments we've received on each section. Have that out in the beginning of August. Then a complete draft of the amended GSP, proposed amended GSP at the end of August. Give everyone a 1 month period to review it and get us comments back. We'll incorporate those. Anticipate bringing the periodic evaluation to the board in October for approval, and then the amended plan to the board in early December for approval, and then get it submitted to DWR by July 31st. Next slide. Now, DWR will perform a review of our periodic evaluation and our amended plan. When they look at the amended GSP, they're going to look at it just like they did the first time. They could approve it, they could find it incomplete and indicate to us what we need to do to revise it, or they could deem it inadequate if they don't think it meets all the requirements. And when they do that, they could provide new recommended corrective actions on the amended GSP. And then last slide. And this is just a location of where these guidelines and the fact sheets are located if anybody wants to review them for themselves. And that concludes. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Director Griffin?
I would just like to thank Jeff and Stetson for, I see that they added in to SkyTem and some other new information. I appreciate you guys that you're willing to look at new information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this?
Chairman Peters,
Yes.
this is Dave Janis, Chair of the PAC.
Yes,
A
sir.
question for Jeff and for the board on the review schedule for the periodic review now that we have the new schedule. And I saw that we don't intend to have the complete copy out until the August timeframe. But do we intend to distribute interim chapters that are relevant for the Policy Advisory Committee to review? And what pops immediately to mind are the management actions and projects, as well as the RCAs that we had previously commented on, and anything else that does follow under the auspices of the Policy Advisory Committee. Do we have a draft schedule for that prior to August?
Yes, if we can bring the presentation back up, it was slide 4 in that presentation was the sections. Yeah, there we go. Periodic evaluation. That's it right there. So that's our schedule for getting the sections of the periodic evaluation up for review.
Okay.
Start.
So those are the sections that you would put out for individual comment for the PAC as well?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be, so we have the new information in the February timeframe, is that correct?
That's right. And in February, it may just be an overview of what new information is available. It may not have all of the text in the section in it yet, but we just want to give people an idea of, what data have we collected since the 2020 GSP.
Okay.
But the rest of them will be, draft sections.
Okay, thank you. And I'll be working with Carol and Steve directly to determine what the PAC meeting schedule will be for review of those or the individual comments if necessary. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janis. Any other comments for the public? Any on the phones? Okay, seeing none, I don't believe that we have to vote on that. I think that's receiving file, so we'll just go to item number 11, which is the Water Resource Manager's Report.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Peters. This is Steve. It's good to see all of you guys again. Thank you, Jeff. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot from this too, because I've been waiting for these a summary of these guidelines, and I think Jeff and Heather and Bianca and Helena, they've all done a great job of summarizing these new guidelines going forward and implementing those. So we're moving forward, and big view just for the board and the public. The big view of what's happened here is the DWR was effectively overwhelmed with GSPs being submitted, and a lot of detail was provided on all of these GSPs, and they have to review them in detail, section by section. Their goal in these guidelines was to streamline the work going forward, not to just completely update the old GSP, because there's a lot of repetition in there on basin setting and things like that, but to focus on what the approved GSP is doing, what the implementation plan is for the GSP, and then to address any potential changes and possibly amendments to the plan. So they're trying to focus what's submitted as a going forward basis and not looking back, and to streamline their review effort, because they frankly get very overwhelmed. So hopefully we get this done. The turnaround with DWR will be a little faster than the original GSP2. So that's just some little background. Okay, so the Water Resource Manager Report. I'm going to walk through it fairly quickly. I'm going to try if I can. All of it's written. It's all there, provided in the board package. And to start with the grants, we still got $30,000 Prop 1 and Prop 68 that's approved and waiting for checks. So we're waiting on that. We're also waiting for, and it's effectively approved because it's retention money on invoices already paid, about $220,000 in 10% retention on those grants. So all in all, we're looking at about $250,000 that we're waiting on DWR. I mentioned, I think at the last meeting, there's been some staff changes with DWR grant management for us and our area. So there's a little bit of getting up to speed, but this is this is getting to take quite a bit of time to get turnaround on our invoices. So that's what's going on Prop 168. Our pipeline grant funding, the implementation grant, we've got 3 invoices that are at DWR, effectively 3 of the 4 invoices for 2023. You can see it in here in the report, totaling about $2.3 million that is under review by DWR. So we're waiting for that to get turned around. It's a fairly significant amount that the Groundwater Authority has fronted funds on, and we will be getting reimbursement very soon. We haven't had any problems so far with any of the grant reimbursements, any of our submittals for the applications, for the invoices, any of the reimbursements. We haven't had any problems so far. We're not expecting them. We're just effectively waiting for this money to come back. We've also got Urban Community Drought Relief Program grant that was awarded. And we're still waiting for DWR to give us a final agreement to execute. Just for general information on this, the DWR apparently has a certain amount of latitude under this program on how and where they want this money to go. And they've asked us where we want to go with it, what we want to use it for. And they're modifying some of the agreement to match that. So that's why it's taking a little time. It's not like before where we had a standard contract and a standard submittal application and they approve that when we move forward. They're actually trying to work with us to make sure that we're able to use these funds in the best possible way and get that into the agreement. So that's why it's taking a little time, but we're still waiting for DWR on that grant. But it has been approved. We have been awarded. The Drinking Water Systems Infrastructure Resiliency and Sustainability Program grant for 2023. The application was submitted. It's a caution. It's a very, very competitive application process. It's not limited to just critically overdrafted basins. So we're in a lot of competition on this. We applied for almost $3 million, $2.8 million for planning, design, environmental rights of way. All this applies to our pipeline project, and we need the money. We expect to hear back from DWR on their awards late winter, early spring this year. Hopefully we'll hear back from them on that award. So that's another $3 million we're out there trying to get. As part of the report, we've included the implementation grant work, the pipeline work. The design work is first. At the end of the design work, we always include next steps so you can see where we're going. We've included the environmental services work next. And again, you can see at the end of that description of what we've been doing. We also have next steps. And then we also, finally, we include the right-of-way services. This right-of-way is extremely important. And at the end of that section, we also include next steps and milestones. Important milestone is we should have a right-of-way acquisition plan by the middle of this year from the consultants. So we're moving forward on all this stuff. And by the way, we're spending money pretty fast, as you folks all know, that grant money. As far as submittals to DWR, the final design report, preliminary design report, it's a preliminary design report. It's a report on the project, is due end of March. PMP, I believe, has it pretty much finalized, but we're doing an internal review. It will make it. It will be there on time, but that's something that still needs to be submitted. The documentation on surveying, geotechnical, and utility research that was submitted to DWR in just this month, so that's done. For the Corps of Engineers, as most of you folks are aware, as part of the funding process that Capital Corps has been so successful in doing the work on, it includes some in-kind services, potentially in-kind services, hopefully with Corps of Engineers. We are still working with the Corps to establish what projects they're work on in a timely manner. We're moving fast, and I think most of you have been working in this area. Recognize the Corps does not work very fast. So we're trying to find projects that we can look down the road and give them plenty of time to apply their in-kind services and get something done, because anything that we're doing with P&P is just going way too fast for the Corps to get an agreement. By the time we got an agreement and decide what they were going to do, most of the stuff that's going on will be done. P&P is moving that fast. So we're still trying to figure out what they can do, but we haven't left the idea of Corps providing in-kind services. So that is in there. Shallow well mitigation program, there's a summary of where we're at. There are 2 staff reports in progress, which will be coming up. The Byerly well and the Halpin well, which we are looking at. Staff reports are in process right now. The annual report, Heather is on, I think, still. Key component, she worked very hard on this annual report. It is out. It was released last week. We are looking for comments back by end of the month, early February. It's due to DWR by April 1st. So that's just information, everybody. It is available. Anybody wants it, just look online or certainly ask April or us. Under the, excuse me, the data collection and monitoring, data collection and monitoring is going on. GSP model configuration. Jeff walked through the work on the periodic review of the GSP. It indicated where we're at. A lot of work's been done on that model. It has essentially been updated. I won't call it reconstructed, but the updated information has been into the construction of the model. So all the data that we've collected since the 2020 model has been included. We are working on calibration right now of that model right now. So the whole idea of new science that has been thrown out there, from a lot of folks that were involved in the original model, but being thrown out there now, is very rapidly becoming too late to include in this this review, periodic review of the GSP. We need it yesterday, so that's just so everybody to know. We needed it when it was done, and when it was first done and supposedly completed, it should have been provided as part of the technical work that we're working on. So just for information, we are moving forward on the model. We have successfully, I've reported before, successfully transferred the models. So we in conjunction with the Navy and DRI, we, Stetson, and the Groundwater Authority, we have the model. We have the 2020 model that was used. We have successfully run it, duplicating the model results that are in the GSP. So we are paralleling and on track with the Navy and DRI with the modeling work. And it's important because we are working with the Navy also on potentially defense of the GSP. So yes, we're all on the same page on the modeling work. The subflow from Rose Valley, we are working on the second monitoring well. We're having a little difficulty getting reimbursement funding from the Navy under the Navy Coastal Contract. April and some people in our office have been working on this for months and months. So that's money that's been spent, and we need reimbursement for that. We don't have any indication why we're not going to get it, but it is just taking some time to process that application and get that reimbursement. At the same time, we've now extended the time to put the second monitoring well in and working on permitting and again, funding for that second monitoring well in Rose Valley. LADWP emergency releases, kind of an important thing. We had a very wet year. A lot of water was released. We're still collecting data. We did collect another set of data. We will be collecting another set of data in January. We are working on evaluation of that data and a technical memorandum reviewing what our findings are based upon the amount of water released and monitoring well data out into the basin away from the release points. A technical memorandum is currently being prepared right now. A draft has not been prepared. It's currently underway. So that's what's going on under the Water Resource Manager report. I will certainly be happy to answer questions, and Jeff and Heather and Bianca are certainly on too. So happy to answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a couple, please. Steve, if we go back to the shallow well mitigation, I see that you said that updated report form and fact sheet would be incorporating PAC's comments would be uploaded. I was hoping that would be brought back to the board with your comments, and then we could look at both side by side and then look at your plan, and then the board approve that. So is that going to happen, or is it just being uploaded based on you taking the information from PAC and then moving forward with the plan that you guys designed, or is the board going to get to approve it?
We didn't anticipate, Director Gritt, we didn't anticipate board approval of this. It really is It's not a policy change. There's nothing changing in shallow well implementation policy. The PAC provided some clarification for the actual application, the report form for a shallow impacted shallow well, which was intended to provide additional guidance to the well owner. It's pretty simple stuff, but it was definitely helpful. And then also provided a fact sheet on what to look for and how to approach reporting an impacted well. The actual implementation policy and how we implement an application or a report form that comes in of an impacted shallow well, none of that has changed. And that is what the board approved, was the policy under it. The report form and the fact sheet are just information. And if any of the board members or actually anybody else thinks that they need more information or less or are confusing, we're happy to look at that too. But we did not anticipate board approval of those. They've just been modified based on input from the PAC.
Okay. I personally would like to see the board be able to look at those side by side in a comparison, and then we could look at the plan, and because we're the ones that are going to be voting to approve or not approve somebody's well, and then we would know what steps were taken, if the guidelines that were, because we had a very lengthy discussion on the last time this happened, as far as a well being brought. So I would like to see that happen. It's up to the rest of the board, but I would like to look at that and then the board approve it before it's posted. My next question, you mentioned the 2020 DRI model and working with new information and including that. It's my understanding to date that model has not been available to the water district consultants or to the water district to review. So is it now available so we can look at that model, or our consultants can look at that?
I think in answer to that, I don't think, I don't mean to correct you, Director Giffen. I don't think that's exactly correct. The model, the Navy DRI model, was available to everyone in the TAC and in the modeling group, and the Water District used to be a part of that when they were working on the TAC. As far as the model code and the actual model itself, to be able to run the model or modify the model, there obviously is very, very limited access to that. It took us all 2 years working with the Navy under various agreements to get that model so that we now have that. We have a configuration management plan with the Navy that has been adopted by the Navy and the Groundwater Authority on how we jointly own that model or jointly use that model and what it can be used for and not used for. So likely it'll be very difficult for the Water District to get to that stage where they have the model in a form that both DRI and the Navy and the Water Resource, the Groundwater Authority has the model. On the flip side of that, going back to the modeling group and the TAC, the model itself has always been available to the Water District or even the large ag. When we did the original modeling for the GSP, I believe that the ag group, we modeled a specific model run for the ag group and then gave them the results. So it always has been available. We've talked about working closer with the Water District and the Water District's technical folks than we have in the past because of various reasons, but going forward. And the model is available. If the Water District would like to do model runs or do some modeling under a cooperative arrangement with the Groundwater Authority. Obviously, depending on what it is, the Water District may have to fund part of that, but it's always been available for stakeholders in the basin to come into the Groundwater Authority and seek to use the model to evaluate something in the basin.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I just think it's important that we're working together at it, so that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public comment.
Judy Decker, member of the PAC. Steve, I haven't had time to review the latest versions that were sent of the well mitigation plan documents. Stetson sent 3 documents. I received them this morning. So I believe we ought to have the ability to comment on them yet again. In a quick glance at one of the documents, for instance, I saw some rather poor grammar. And I would like to take the opportunity to tell you that I will review it and send you additional comments if they are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. We appreciate that. I tried to emphasize, based on Director Griffith's questions, also that we consider those documents to be somewhat living documents. So absolutely, your input. And you're right. I just saw this morning before the meeting that Myra had sent it back out based upon the last comments received from the PAC. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, any other additional public comments? Okay, seeing none from the floor, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee Westerlusk. I have a question regarding the model, the DRI model. I just want clarification. Is the model going to be taking into consideration the new data at all? Or you mentioned that it was too late to incorporate the new data in the review or the update of the GSP 5-year update plan, but how does it affect the model, this possible new method using SkyTem? Is it going to affect the model? That's my question.
Thank you, Renee. It's a very, very good question. Jeff is also on the line. So Jeff, you're welcome to add. I'll just provide this from Renee. Good question. In Jeff's presentation on the periodic review of the GSP, he did walk through some of the new information that has been included in the updated model for this periodic GSP update and the new modeling. For example, SkyTem data that we have and reviewed. I understand there's some new stuff that we don't even have yet, but the SkyTem data that had been done in the past was reviewed, included in the modeling group, in the TAC and the modeling group. So it's been included. There is a list of the information that's been included in the model update. So that information has been included. The bigger question that you ask, what is the impact of this reported new data? What I'm not sure what it is, but these numbers that are being thrown out, we will not know what those are until we get them, and we don't have them. So the idea that we were able to include, we certainly aren't going to include any of that information at face value. There will be a process that we go through, and it's a normal process that everybody's been through since the beginning. And that is, if we do get provided with some information, like some technical information, there will be at least 2 areas of review. One will go through our technical advisory committee. Certainly our office as technical folks, the water resources manager, along with the technical advisory committee. And secondly, we do have a very technical modeling group that has worked on this model update, and that group will look at this stuff. So there is a process, to a third-party process to review whatever we get, or if we get something to go through before it would ever be considered to be put into this model update for this periodic GSP review. So I hope that answers your question, because I don't really know, because I don't know what's out there or what we're getting, because all we're being given is a couple of numbers thrown out, no information. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to add anything, Jeff?
No, I don't have anything to add to that, Steve. Thanks.
Okay, so I hope, does that answer your question, Renee?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other callers on the phone? Okay, it looks like we had one more person just walk in for public comment. So,
thank you, Chairman. Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios. I just wanted to have, I guess, a point of clarification on the prior model runs. An issue with models is that there's a lot of variables and inputs, And if those aren't made public, it's then hard for the public to trust the results. And I'll just leave that there. I would ask people if they have an opportunity to look at the harder model, HARDER model that was used over in kind of the Porterville, Lower Tule area of the Central Valley. That model was a publicly developed model that had a lot of stakeholder input. And when the model runs were done, you could see very granular input and output information. So everyone knew what went in, everyone knew what came out, and everyone was able to then have an argument about the science. So I just want to point out that we have a little bit of a different issue here where you had a black box that model runs were done and then were reported out of. But that level of granularity and detail was never provided to the public, and I think that's bred some of the mistrust and issues over time. So I appreciate your guys' time on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, as Steve was saying, these models were provided to the PAC and the TAC, unlike the new report that's been reported. So, Steve, would you like to go ahead and provide some comments on that?
Yeah, I would like to provide a comment.
Steve, real quick.
I asked Steve to respond to that real quick, and then we can go back to you if you have a question.
I just wanted to clarify whenever I get a chance. Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to just flat out say I disagree, but I think it's misrepresenting the facts because actually Mojave Pistachio, technical consultants, the water districts, Cyril's, Meadowbrook, all of their technical consultants were involved. And some of them were actually a part of the modeling group that were involved in the input data that went into the 2020 GSP model. So everybody was involved. The technical folks, including Don Decker and the TAC, were involved in it. It wasn't done out in the public because this was a highly technical work, but there was full transparency in input to that model, full transparency in modeling results. We made the final run was a model 6B, which tells you we had 6 model runs that everybody reviewed the input and the results. So there was full transparency there. The fact that there is not full transparency now is because these folks are not part of the TAC and are not involved, and it's not our choice.
Just so my point of clarification would be, Steve actually did it for me, was that there was full transparency, except that it's a private model, so people can't see it being run. My only point is, in every other GSA in the Central Valley, including a lot of the other Kern County ones, they're public models, so people can even see the running part of it as well. So that was my only point. I realized that on our behalf, someone ran the model for us, but that's different than being able to actually see it as it's being run. It's just a trust issue, and that helps with more transparency. So that was all I was saying. So again, I appreciate your guys' time on this one. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, to follow up, Josh, understand your concern. Models are interesting in that there's a fine line being able to run a model or being able to modify it. So I personally would have no problem if your consultants would like to run the model without the ability to change the model or change the input, or we were on the same page on what the input was, and we would run it concurrently or something. I really don't care. The issue is that you have to maintain security in the model itself.
Yeah, the commenter has left the meeting.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yes, Wes Kassenstein, domestic well owner, member of the PAC. And basically, I study physics. They say physicists are untrained, engineers are trained, but physicists are asked to understand what's happening. And I think I have a fairly good understanding of how the Navy model is structured, how it represents reality, how the math works. It's very sophisticated. It's a finite element analysis type model. And that's the kind of modeling that's used in a lot of important technology around the world now. And I have high confidence in the way it is structured. And of course, it's structured as I understand it, so you can, as you learn more about the basin, for example, where the good and poor water is, where the clay is, you can change the model and you can run it. And I have confidence in the level of sophistication and the way that this thing represents reality and the way it can accommodate new understandings about reality. I know nothing about the other mystery model. I don't even know the names of individuals involved with it. There's nobody laying a reputation on the line standing up here that I stand behind this. It's just a mystery. We know nothing about how it represents reality, what the math is, how the data flows through it. And that's what concerns me. I think the real key thing that of the new mystery numbers are the groundwater and storage. And if we don't know how the reality is represented mathematically in this mystery model, we have no reason to believe the groundwater and storage numbers. And I think from a political point of view, those are the numbers that you want. There's a paid model. The people who paid for it want to be able to say, oh, there's so much groundwater and storage we can pump forever and we can solve the problem in 20 years. That was the same argument that Tony Brown brought up some years ago. So we need to know this model. We need to know how it represents reality, because those are the critical numbers. Now, I think for the Groundwater Authority, what they like is the new number that the recharge is doubled. Therefore, maybe we can draw a line where the fees are paid lower on the list of prioritized rights to water. So everyone's getting that paid for it's getting maybe what they want politically. I'm not totally sure the water districts has a really useful long-term vision for themselves in being part of this. But anyway, I would like to see the nuts and bolts, the physics, how the world is represented in this new mystery model. I'd like to know who's standing behind it. And then I think we can better understand how to use the data, and perhaps we can improve the modeling that exists for this basin. So those are just my observations as an individual. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment?
I'm Don Decker. I'm one of the last surviving TAC members. What Wes just gave you, I would like to concur with and add a little bit to it. We both are physicists, West and I, and in my career with the Navy, I spent 20 years off and on working on projects that are virtually, they're not identical. They're very similar to SkyTEM. And when I see the SkyTEM results, I am mystified at, their result. They are really confident. However, the actual process that they have used is not transparent. If a physicist that is used to that kind of data and analysis can't readily do anything with it except to say, okay, that looks good, or that's garbage, there's something wrong. And the something wrong is the whole approach. The model does not take into account, for example, multipath. When you send an electromagnetic wave through the atmosphere or through the Earth, there are signals that come back from the surface, and layers that are just a few feet down below the surface come back, but they come back as if they had come from a much deeper zone. And multipath, without taking that into account, your analysis is basically worthless. So I caution this board. I have cautioned everybody who has ever been here and talked about it. The presentation that was given of SkyTEM in this very room a number of years ago, I brought up the issue of multipath, and the presenter basically, I don't know, he was so angry that he was practically blubbering. It was an unbelievable scene, actually. It happened right at the door we usually come in. So be careful, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. Any other members of the public that would like to comment on this?
Judy Decker again. I would like to remind you and the people who might be listening or will listen later that DRI came with Gene Moran, Stetson's hydrologist, several times during the course of creating and analyzing the data that they collected in the first DRI groundwater model. They came several times and made presentations to this board. So, no, they didn't bring the model and set it up and show it to the public, but they made presentations of their findings. They not only have done that, these people have come and explored the canyons and the valley physically themselves. And I will remind those listening and the board, the DRI stands for Desert Research Institute and is a part of the University of Nevada. It is not hired by a particular water pumper. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, that'll wrap up the Water Resource Manager's report. Thank you, Steve. And that'll take us to the General Manager's report with Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should have a pretty brief report today. Your December 31st financials are in the packet, and you'll see that, well, you'll recall you did budget adjustments last month, so those have been incorporated here. You'll see with the original budget, the budget amendment, and then the adjusted budget there. And so basically, year-end statements, and if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Quick report on the communications and engagement plan. I'm still working on redoing our website. We have not actually transferred to using the new one. We're still working on it, as we're calling it a staging website, looking to transfer data, add new data, kind of reorganize it. And we'll be getting our staff, our engineering staff, and our legal folks to take a look at it too. I think give us some suggestions and input, and we'll start making some additional information available on that very soon. So looking forward to having that new website daylighted here pretty soon. And then finally, we have our monthly report from Capital Core Group. I think they've been pretty busy trying to get our pipeline project submitted in the for authorization in the WRDA 24 Water Resources Development Act for 2024. Michael McKinney, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to say that, and good afternoon, members of the board, just to say that in December, Senator Padilla did submit and approved our request. It is now with the Environment and Public Works Committee in the Senate, being considered by the Senate. Senator Butler is in support of that request as well. So we have both California and United States senators now in support of the request. Just a few moments ago, Jeff hit the final send button for the House version of the bill, submitting the request to Representative Mike Garcia for consideration. That we expect within the next month or so. And then, as I would say, the real legislative action begins as Congress and the committees begin to work out the draft legislation, which we expect in March. One other item of note since our last meeting, the NDAA 24 was indeed signed by the president. It is now law, so that is in effect. That did include the DCIP now as a programmatic fund rather than a pilot program, so it is more permanent in its basis. And then finally, we have been asked, the authority has been asked, as well as the city has been asked, to support Senator Padilla's low-income household water assistance program legislation that he is drafting. There is a summary of that bill in there. And then, of course, tomorrow is the long anticipated state budget for California for 24 and 25, which shows a $68 billion shortfall. We will see the details and if the governor is going to put a emergency status on the state in his release tomorrow. And that pretty much concludes my report.
And that also concludes mine, Mr. Chairman. So if you have any questions, by all means, let me know.
Okay, thank you, Carol, and thank you, Mike and Capcor for that. Looking forward to see how that progresses. Any comments or questions from the board on the general manager's report? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public for comment. Okay, seeing none, that brings us to item 13, which is the date of our next meeting. It's February 14th, 2024. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Chairman, can I just say that I will be replaced next month by Emma Lynch. She'll also be on the TAC as you approved today. So I just want to say it's been my pleasure serving for the last 4 years. And thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We appreciate your service and look forward to working with Ms. Lynch. Okay, and with that, we're adjourned.